uh, I teach, let me pull up my agenda, but I teach at some primitive skills gatherings. And I teach wilderness first aid and wilderness first responder courses. And I love medical things. This is just a small, some people collect other items. I collect weird medical stuff, and I love it. I've got a lot of years of, for about 12 years, I ran a wilderness therapy program. And I had a lot of staff out in the field with kids that were in trouble. And frequently there were medical needs, and all of my staff had to be trained as wilderness first responders. So I got my EMT, I got my wilderness EMT certification so that I could train them. And in my mind at that time, I was in the wilderness always. I didn't think I'd ever need any skills of an actual EMT, like riding on an ambulance or something, so I didn't pay attention to like the cool devices that they have or anything like that. So I just kind of ignored it. Well, about 2 years ago, Amber.
Have people scoot to the edges so latecomers can slide them.
Scoot this way, I guess, if you could.
If you don't mind, there's just gonna be people coming in late, so.
We'll figure it out. What's that? So anyway, about a year ago, I started riding with Mapleton Ambulance and really wished I would have paid attention to a lot of the stuff that I learned in my EMT course. But still, even to this day, hi Ty. You guys want a seat? Grab some chairs. Don't worry about it. Kathy, how are you? Okay. So I've had a couple years of dealing with medical stuff, but what I'm going to teach you guys today, I'm going to show you my wilderness medical kit. It's what I carry with me everywhere, but there are some improvised things that I have in my med kit. But I just wanted to touch on briefly, if you're in this class, I'm officially knighting all of you as medical officers. Does that feel cool? You guys are all medical officers if you feel so inclined to be in this class. And what I mean by that is, maybe you're the ones that bring a little first aid kit on outings that people are like, what are you doing? I just got done with a retreat. I just left the retreat this morning. And I brought my med kit and I got teased. They're like, geez, do you think the end of the world's gonna happen? I'm like, maybe. I don't know. But I bring it with me everywhere because I use it, right? I like to be the one that uses things. And if you guys feel that way, I'd suggest you find a med kit that works for you and take it with you. I've got a smaller one that goes in my computer bag every day. But as a medical officer, I wanted to remind everybody that kind of makes you a risk manager as well. Because if you're the one that treats people when they get hurt, you know, what is that saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If I can stop people from getting hurt, that's a big deal. So I worked with troubled teens, but I employed a lot of troubled young adults. You know, they worked for me. And man, those guys are like puffing up their plumes to show off for girls and stuff. I had staff that were doing backflip off of trees, and I'd have to go over there and go, stop. I can't handle you with a broken leg and carrying you out however far, you know. So be willing as a medical officer to maybe say, hey, I see that you're carving towards yourself. Maybe you want to hold that stick differently, which isn't always comfortable, but you're the one that's going to have to deal with that big cut later on. So as a commissioned medical officer, you have permission to talk to people to try to keep them safe. So let's see. Cool. So these are just a few of my med kits, and every one of these has been, everything up here has been a primary med kit of mine from one time or another for different things. My wife has shoes that go with every outfit, and I have a med kit for every occasion. Right? So that's how we roll in our family. She's a lot better at this stuff than I am with mine. But I just wanted to show, before I get into the contents of my primary kit, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what you could use. This is cool and red. It's outdoor research, and it's to keep your sandwiches in when you're going climbing, right? But I liked it, and I use it as my med kit for a lot of years. It's got a little bag up here and just an open container. I like open containers and I use cheap, simple things. I keep Altoid tins and I keep Tic Tac containers, and I always buy these treats. These are my Sunday treats. My kids know. This is what I give them on Sunday to keep them calm, right? Some of you may have had some of these from me from time to time.
It's an emergency kit.
That's right, exactly. But these little things are awesome and they're free, and I store all kinds of things in these. You know, you'll see in my primary med kit that I use them a lot. But it's up to you, but you don't have to break the bank to have a med kit and to be ready for things. This right here, it looks like I'm repping outdoor research, but I'm not. They're actually just a cheaper company to get outdoors gear. This was my med kit probably the longest of all things. And it kind of looks like a shaving kit, right, that you'd hang up. But it's meant to be a little kitchen that you hang up if you're cooking and stuff. And there was a place to put all my things. I like to have my stuff organized, to be able to see it. Little bag, and I could hang it up there. And I used this for a lot of years. I kind of got obsessed with how things were done in the past. And some of the best med kits in the past were like field doctors working, you know, like Civil War doctors that had to take their kit out. And they always used rolls. So I would keep a lot of my stuff in these rolls. This was the first roll I ever did. I love this one. This was one of my staff who was really bored out in the field, and he forgot his med kit. He had a whole bunch of stuff, but he didn't have his med kit. So he took some material that he found in one of our bags and took these. These are just Ziplocs, and he sewed them all into this and just made it was really ingenious, you know. He made a little place to put a pen, and you can just sew it up. So, you can make a med kit out of anything. This is kind of a more expensive commercial med kit, and you can get this, but I don't love them. And I don't mean to talk bad about anything, but this is like $130. And the Band-Aids themselves are plastic and horrible. They don't stick. The tape doesn't stick to anything. I don't love it. So you can get it. I actually like the bag, so I'll keep it for the bag, but I don't love the contents, which is the expensive part anyway. This is an old highway patrolman's bag that they kept in their car, and I got it from State Surplus for $2. And they had a whole bin of them, and I wish I would have bought them all. But just big, open, spaces to put things. This is kind of more the style nowadays, the IFAC, that kind of thing. And it's similar to but this is what people keep in their smaller med kits. This is what, when I go on I do adventure motorcycling, and this is what I throw in my panniers, to go for a quick ride. This one was my very first when I was this is a trainer's bag, like as a trainer at the high school. She gave me this, and I've stitched this thing so much, it's stained and gross and whatever, but there's just big open compartments. And I like to have, look at, poor sewing job. Glad you guys can't see that real close up. But you can use just about anything. This right here is what I put in my car. I usually have it rolling around in the back of my car, and it's called a jump kit. And it's got a lot of this smaller stuff, but it also has my seat collar. So this is like if I'm around a big car accident or something, I like to have this. And I've got the bag, the breathing bag in here, just some bigger stuff that maybe I wouldn't take normally, but I just keep it in my car or my truck. And this is my big guy. So this is a Pelican that came off of an ambulance actually. And ambulance guys love to have their stuff organized. They were throwing these away. And I just said, you're throwing that away? I'll take it. It worked fine, but they wanted a different color that would match everything, so I got this. And this is what I take to my primitive skills gathering. So I teach wilderness medicine and shoemaking at those, but I also man the med tent. So I've got a big med tent that's set up, and it's why I still go. Like, I love to go and learn, wilderness stuff. And I don't ever wish harm on anybody, but how often do you get to practice your medical skills? Well, at these primitive skills gatherings, you've got 150 instructors, 500 to 600 students, 100 or 200 people that have never been before, and there's nothing but fire, sharp things, pokey things. It's inevitable someone's going to get hurt. And I kind of love the feeling of what's going to walk into my tent. Wendy's been with me over there, and it's just exciting. And I don't wish harm on anybody, but it sure is fun to get to help people feel better when they're hurt, right? I've got a friend that comes with me. He's a nurse practitioner. And so if there's anything complicated internally, I just say, you need to go talk to Jason. I don't know why you've got the rash on half your body. That's crazy. I don't want to see it. Go talk to him, right? And he's willing to do that. But this is my kit that I take up there. And it's just got, you know, some of my tools in there, some of the different things that I've got. And I'll get into some of this other stuff, but I mean EpiPens and anything that's going to save somebody's life like that, I keep, and I keep a lot of. I almost always have an EpiPen with me. I take an inhaler with me anywhere. These things that if somebody's choking or dying that you could, I'll show you in a minute, but naloxone. Has anybody ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. If somebody is overdosed, let me tell you a quick story in case you want to put this in your med kit. They say it's changed, but about 5 years ago I went to my doctor and I asked for a naloxone prescription, right? And naloxone is if you have an opiate overdose, you can give it to somebody and it will save their life. Their heart will start back up and they'll live, right? And ambulance drivers keep it on tap. They use it a lot. Well, I asked to get it, and I told him I teach at these primitive skills things. I like to have them just in case. And he's like, that's great. Wrote me a prescription. And about a month later, my wife's at the doctor, and she's like, our insurance isn't working. Did you pay the premium? And I'm like, what? It just comes right. Yes, of course. They had canceled my insurance because I had asked for that, and they considered me a high risk because I must be an addict. And I was really, and when I explained to them, they were obviously embarrassed and said that there were internal things that just did that. And so be cautious when you, now I think you can get it without prescription, is that correct?
Yeah, you know, I had them handed to me at like different fairs.
Yes,
And so
yeah.
like, I've kept them in my cars, like different fairs have them out.
I'm pretty sure Utah changed that to make it more accessible for people, because I think there are maybe some really good proactive addicts out there that want it, but the people that really want it are the loved ones of people that are struggling with that addiction, and so they've made it a lot easier to get, which I'd recommend having. I mean, if you have the ability to save somebody's life like that, I keep that with me in mass. So anyway, this is my stuff. And you know, there's all kinds of things in here. I'm gonna keep this out. But I've also got some show and tell a little bit later that I'm gonna show people. Not quite for the faint of heart. It's not super graphic, but it's a little bit graphic. So if you want to see some pictures of some stuff, I'll show it to you. So this is a big med kit, but it travels with me wherever I go on those trips, on those big ones. But this is my precious. This is my current, what I use. This is my small first aid kit, right? That's my bigger one. This goes in my backpack when I'm backpacking. The compartment that used to be for my sleeping bag now houses my med kit. But I like to have it and I use it. And I like to be prepared. And if you guys have taken a first aid class or anything like that, it's pretty important to commit in your mind that if you see something, you'll do something. Right? And I find that with that in mind, I'm kind of led to circumstances where I can be of a service to others, right? So you'll get those chances if you put yourself in the sphere to do those things. So go and be prepared. How long do we have? Is this 1 hour?
I just had a question. A lot of
Sure.
times it's legal. I mean, when can you not help someone? I mean, someone that's not trained. When can you offer whatever
You
without
can
having
actually
a legal?
help people all the time and you don't get, Utah changed the law that you can actually help people, like if you're a bystander coming up on the exit, you're not gonna get sued.
Yeah, it's called a Good Samaritan law. And there's never been a successful case in United States history of somebody suing somebody as a lay person just stopping to try to help. And they protect first responders. Now, the people that can get in trouble are actually trained medical personnel that are working outside of their scope of area. They can be sued and actually personally be liable if they stop. That's why a lot of doctors won't stop at car wrecks and intubate somebody, even though it might save their life. They could lose their license and their livelihood. And it stinks that we're in a litigious society where that can happen, but it happens. And we've had first responders who get sued because the person wanted to die, but they didn't have their do not resuscitate. And so the person brought them back to life and they sued them for keeping them alive. It's unfortunate, but it happens. But I think that Those laws are even getting better to protect people who are just willing to. So I take that back. As long as they're not doing a higher level of skill, if they're only helping on the level of skill that a regular person, if they just pull over and pull somebody out and do CPR, they're okay. If they do give them a trach and pop the, all the shows and put the pen in their throat or something to save their life, they can open themselves up to liability. Because everybody has medical supervision and you have to have permission to operate wherever you're at, right? So, anyway. Okay, good question. But I would highly suggest getting as much medical training as you can.
I'm curious, can you ask for inhalers and EpiPens too?
Yep.
And they'll give them to you?
And I've got tricks on that because
Yeah, 'cause I feel like EpiPens are...
they're so expensive,
Yeah.
but I've got tricks, and I had a whole thing I wanted to print off, and I was going to show up, and hopefully someone from the state was here that I could print some things, and then I realized I'm actually 5 minutes late, not 55 minutes early, so I will have to email you this information, but I've got a whole thing on my Facebook. I've got a Facebook kind of dedicated to like wilderness medicine, but there's tricks on there of how you can get EpiPens very cheap. And you can actually ask for EpiPen shots. If you're comfortable giving a shot, you can buy for $30, 30 shots of epinephrine versus $100-something for one EpiPen, one time, right? But there are other ways that you can do it to do it cheaper. And you just have to tell your doctor why. But they love it. I mean, they'll help you out. The albuterol inhaler, they're not a controlled substance, so they're happy to let you do that to be prepared. So, okay. So this is my med kit, and my plan is just to go through it with you and maybe give you some ideas, because a lot of people have ideas of what they want in their kit already. If something sparks your interest, take a note. I wish I had my papers that I wanted printed. And what I'll do is take a roll, and anybody that wants the contents of this kit or my smaller kit, I have it written out so that you can go and find it. At the Primitive Skills, I teach this class, and I used to sell this stuff and just say, I've already got it if you want to put it together. But you guys can probably find great deals on Amazon and all kinds of cool places to build your own kit, and that's the point, is to have it, not to sell it, right? So I will get that, and anybody that wants me to send you that stuff, I'm happy to. I'll email you today with that. So I'll move through this kind of quick. If you have questions, stop me, and I'm happy to talk on any item. There are things in here that I teach whole classes on up at these gatherings, like drilling a hiker's toe and how to do that. So I might just tool for that, and if you want more information, I've got information on those things. So we'll just start off with some of my tools. And I don't really have these in any particular order. I just want to show you what's in here. But I always keep like a tongue depressor. This can be used for a brace. Okay, let me start off. My med kit, almost everything has a dual use in my wilderness med kit. Unless I have a really special reason that I know I'm going to use, I like to have things I can depress a tongue with this. I can stir hot chocolate with this. I can, whatever. So I like to have multiple items. This is a scalpel, and it's specifically made to cut flesh. And that sounds morbid and whatever, but I've had circumstances where somebody fell and a sharp blade of grass, like a dry piece of grass, went right between the webs of their fingers, and it was jagged on both sides. To pull it out would have been really bad. And I just took this and lightly cut and was able to remove it. But this is, it's made to cut that, A sharp knife or even an X-Acto blade isn't as sharp as a scalpel. And you can get these 100 for $10 on Amazon, right? And there's a lot of uses for that. I like to have multiple of these if I'm out in the wilderness, but just a thermometer. This is a dollar store thermometer, and the battery still works, and it's been in my kit for 3 years, right? And I have a little thing of plastic to put over this so you can put it in your mouth, but it's cheap. You don't have to break the bank. $1 at the dollar store and you can have a thermometer, right? I've got a temporal thermometer and all this stuff, but this is easy. This is important to have in your med kit. Chapstick. You can use it for chapped lips, but you can put it on so many things. You can use chapstick. My thermometer. That's nice. You can use chapstick as a type of sun repellent. people's nose is getting burned, you can put that on there. It also helps with frostbite. If you're feeling like you're getting frostbite on your ears or whatever, people on Mount Everest will use chapstick and put it on their ears to stop the frostbite. It's just a really good one to have, and it's easy. It's moisturizing. You can put it on anything that's dry.
Jacob, is that chapstick brown chapstick, or does it matter?
Whatever. Yeah, I don't think it matters. I do like chapstick. They're medicated stuff they talk about. As a kid, I was obsessed with not using it because I said, I'm not going to be addicted to that stuff. And I was being silly. But it's really helpful for those things. But most are good. You know, I like Burt's Beeswax, but it kind of has that peppermint oil that can be a little bit sharp if you're using it for other things. Like you wouldn't want to put that near your eyes if you needed to. So, yeah. This is a pupil flashlight. You can use it as an actual flashlight, you know, as a backup flashlight. But it gives a gauge on the side, which you'll have to kind of be trained a little bit, but you don't need formal training. You can jump on YouTube University and see how to, you can check on the dilation of pupils, which is an indicator of a lot of things. Drug usage, concussions, that kind of stuff. My son's in the MTC right now. He FaceTimed me and was like, Dad, I just got slammed on my head and I think I've got a concussion. And I walked his companion out to check his pupils, and he did have a slight concussion and had to go to the urgent care. I'm like, shouldn't have been wrestling, buddy. But anyway, so this is nice to have, and I just keep it in there. Does this look scary, Ty? Does that look scary to you? Big scare? It's not. This is a really big gauge syringe for irrigating wounds, and that's just to wash wounds out in the wilderness, right?
It doesn't look like it has a sharp edge.
It doesn't. It's blunt.
That would
You're
be
exactly right.
terrible to have jabbed into you.
Yeah, you don't want this being jabbed into you, but in the wilderness, it's really important to keep wounds clean, right? Now, if you don't have one of these, guess what else you could use? You could take any plastic bag. You could fill this up and just lightly tear off the corner and squeeze the bag to be able to irrigate a wound, right? There's little tips and tricks like that all the time. In fact, I don't get any money for repping this book, but I love this book and I give it as gifts to people all the time. Wilderness Medicine and Travel by Eric Weiss. I love his book. So he's a doctor.
Is that on your list?
It is, actually. Yep. So he's an emergency room doctor who loves wilderness stuff. And in here, you'll find what he calls wise advice. So it's his tie over the shoulder doctrine. Like, as a doctor, I need to really be proper about how I do things. And he said, but as a regular human, you can do this. So this right here is just showing, this is actually showing how to do a trach. So you don't want to do that, cut the throat. But he's showing that if you had to save somebody's life, I guess you could do it. I love to read this book, and when I'm in the wilderness, I'll just break it out and read it. There's just a ton of really good advice, and he calls them improvised techniques. It means you use what you have in your kit, which you can see my kit's a little bit big. I like to be prepared for a lot of things. But get this book. If you're interested in this stuff, it will be really helpful. Okay, so syringe for irrigating wounds. I'm a member of the Wilderness Medicine Society, which is headquartered in Utah. They moved from San Diego to Utah because we love the outdoors here. There's a whole study from Berkeley on what is the best improvised technique for irrigating wounds. Because sometimes if I push this hard, it could cause damage to the flesh underneath, right? They said that in a hospital setting, the amount of pressure, if you have a Gatorade bottle, you know the Gatorade bottle that has the turn thing at the top that you could take a drink off of, it's like orange? That kind of opening and squeezing it is about the pressure that you'd want to clean a wound. And so this can be a little bit intense. I just do it very lightly to get the dirt and stuff out, but that's just a little bit of advice there. This is one of the only, this is a specialty item, and I've done this enough in the wilderness. So this right here is actually, so I got one of these from a hospital, and it was a single usage one. And I found that on Amazon, you can get one that you can replace the batteries, and it's called a thread burner, where you can push this button and it heats up to red hot the tip of this to melt threads so that your sewing doesn't come undone. And that's great. But what else I use it for is to burn through toenails and fingernails to alleviate the pressure that's under there. Now that sounds scary, and it is a little bit, but I've done this procedure in the wilderness almost more than any other with all the kids that are hiking. You get what's called hiker's toe. If their shoes aren't right or they're not tight enough and you're hitting the tip of your toe enough that it causes this it's the same thing if you hit your thumb with a hammer and you get that black underneath there and it's so painful, it feels like it's broken. The pressure is what's causing that. So if you take this, and this you have to be careful. What I usually use and what I've used a lot in the past, imagine a paper clip. Opening up the paper clip, the bluntness of that paper clip, that flat end, I would heat up with like a camp stove or something till it's red hot, and you just tap very lightly, and it'll make a little hole. It doesn't hurt, and then you heat it back up and you just tap. And you do it 3, 4, 5 times until you burn through. And the first time I did it, I'm like, I had a girl, she was another staff, there was only 2 of us on this trip, and both of her big toes, she's like, I can't even walk. I can't put my shoes on, I'm hurt. And I'm like, we don't have food or water till we get to the next campsite. Like, I'm thinking of, I'm gonna build a thing, the kids are gonna have to carry her. I said, I know this weird technique, I've never done it. Do you want me to experiment on you? And she's like, yes. So she got into my little pup tent, and I'm in there, and I was so scared to even tap. It took me 20 taps. Barely touching, right? I was scared. You can do it in about 3 if you do it properly. 20 times, I was like, ooh. And the first time, she had a lot of pressure, and it squirted blood and pus on the roof of my tent. And she was screaming, but like excited. And she's like, it took it from an 8 or 9 on the pain scale to a 1 or a 2 immediately. She's like, that's amazing, do the other toe, I'm gonna film it. And so I still have a film of me doing the second one, and it worked really well. And she lost her toenails. And then they grew back and they were beautiful and it was wonderful. But she didn't lose the toenails because of the holes that were put in there. She was gonna lose those toenails anyway from the hitting of it, right? The procedure is called trephination of a subungual hematoma. And that just means you've smashed something under your toenail and it's really painful. And so trephination is putting a hole in it, right? This right here is a very quick way, and you have to be cautious with it. And holy cow, time's flying by. I don't mean to take too much time. And I guess I'm not here to teach this technique. But anyway, you gotta be careful, but this will go right through the nail very quickly. And so if you do this, it's 1 tap and it's very light and it'll burn right through and it's over. I mean, you're talking 1 second and their pain's gone. So it's one of those things where if you're on a trip and you're out and somebody dropped a rock on their toe and they can't move because it's swelling and painful and they're at a 9 and you can take away the pain and go to a 2, it's worth learning that procedure to be able to function. So
What was that called? What is that?
this is a thread burner from Amazon. It's got the replaceable battery back here. And they use these exact things for this exact purpose in the hospitals. And they're single usage. They can only use them once, and they throw them away because it's not sanitary, even though the tip of this gets to 2,000 degrees. I'd say it's pretty sanitary as soon as you touch that button, you know? So. Yeah, exactly. I can't even imagine. Okay, I will move along. Next thing I've got is an EpiPen, and I've got multiple of these. Has anybody ever used an EpiPen on somebody? No? It's not magic. The first time I used it on a kid, I was like, tss, and he's still kind of coughing and choking, and I'm like, what the heck? And it kicked in a little while later, and you get all shaky and whatever, and we thought, good. We gave him the magical thing, it's fine. 30 minutes later, he starts to have an allergic reaction again. And I'm like, wait, we gave him the magical thing. And all this does is it deconstricts, right? It allows breathing to move. It's similar to Benadryl or albuterol inhaler. They all work the same way. So if you're gonna give somebody an EpiPen, you probably need to take them to the doctor, because if you go into the emergency room, they'll put you on an Epi drip, which just keeps that airway open until it works itself out, right? Because what's happening with an EpiPen is you're having an allergic reaction. It's called anaphylactic shock. It's choking you off and you can't breathe. So I carry multiple of these. And as long as I'm talking about it, let me show you. This is an EpiPen. This is an EpiPen. And this is an epinephrine inhaler, which for a while became illegal and was black market, and I had to order them from Denmark to be able to get one. It's Primatene Mist, if you've ever heard of that. And I found, and I submitted an article to the Wilderness Medical Society, which they debated amongst their most prestigious selves for quite a while, saying that can't possibly work. And I'm like, I've used it multiple times and it works. So I'm just giving you my advice and what I call practical medicine. I've done it and it's worked. So I've evacuated kids. I'll give them an EpiPen. We start walking out, heading out, and I keep an extra EpiPen in my pocket that if stuff doesn't go good, I'm going to give it to them again. This Primatene Mist that has 100 or 120 squirts is epinephrine. And I don't think it's going to work wonderful if they're already choking and can't breathe to just squirt this in their mouth because they got to breathe it in. But once the epinephrine has opened the airway, I give them this about every 5 minutes while we're walking out. I just give them another puff of the Primatene Mist. And I think albuterol inhaler would be fine. Giving them Benadryl would help do the same thing. But it has kept their airways open, and I've never had to give a second EpiPen going into the hospital. And they debated it, and finally the head guy's like, if you say it works, good. But we haven't been able to test it. I guess there's this whole, you gotta really be sure about things before you can say it works. So I get it. So I'm saying to you, it might be beneficial to get some Primatene Mist. You can go down to Walgreens right now and buy it. It came back on. I signed the petition to bring Primatene Mist back. I don't even know what it really should be used for. I just keep it for this purpose, that if I have to give it, I want to just keep that in them so that they're safe on the way out. So Primatene Mist is a good one to have. And redundant systems, having multiple. If something can save somebody's life, I have multiple of them. While I'm there, this is my naloxone, and I've got 2 of them. And it's the same way. These are all the same thing. They're just shaped differently. Another company wants you to pay them money, and so they shape it different. Sometimes it works better in certain med kits than others. But you open these, and they'll talk to you.
If you are ready to use, pull off red 2
So you can pull that off, and all you do is push that into the skin, and it. Cool. So it'll talk to you, and that's great. This one doesn't talk to you, and it's fine. I'm sure these are more expensive. But this is the naloxone. This is if you're having an overdose, you can take this, and it'll keep you alive. So it's worth having. I can't even... Evisio is the brand name of this, but the drug is naloxone.
Those are those billboards you see online that says naloxone can save someone's life. That's what they're talking about.
Yep.
Isn't
Yep.
it just for like
drug
illegal drugs?
No, definitely any kind of opiate overdose.
Opiate.
So people can have, so if you have hydrocodone because you had a shoulder dislocation like I did, and they give you those pills, and your son gets into it and takes 5 of them, and it can stop somebody's heart, especially if they're not used to taking it or take too much. That's when you'd use that.
Okay.
So there can be accidental overdoses, there can be overdoses on prescription meds, but it's just an opiate. It's a painkiller. So this is for painkiller overdose. Good question. This is my albuterol inhaler. This will save somebody's life as well. Asthma, any of those. I've given this to people when they've had an allergic. I mean, kids come in and we screen, but allergies can develop over time, and maybe they've never been bitten by a fire ant and they're allergic to that venom and they're not allergic to bee stings, right? But you start itching right here, breathing, wheezing, having issues. We don't mess with it. I'll give them any of these things that I can, but this is for asthma specifically. Am I already out of time, Amber? Oh, good. 10 minutes?
Yeah. What can you do in 10 minutes?
I thought I had till 10.
And there's
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry, I took way too long with the thread burner. Anyway, okay. We'll move quickly. I have multiple tourniquets. Get into a stop the bleed class. Tourniquets can save people's lives. Anywhere. You think of this only on the battlefield, but riding on an ambulance, people on accident can cut their leg with a chainsaw. And I've seen improvised tourniquets save people's lives. So take a tourniquet. That'll save somebody's life. Nasal spray is really good for clearing your nasal. but it's also really good to stop heavy bleeding. So you can squirt that into a wound and it'll vasoconstrict and it'll help stop bleeding. And this is just an improvised technique that if you need to, I'll do the disclaimer, go to the doctor if you're anywhere here. Don't use this today on your kid when you can take him to the doctor. This is improvised.
And what kind of product in the nasal spray?
I can't remember what it is, but it's saffron. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Cayenne pepper is supposed to help with that too.
That's so strange you say that. Did I? Wow. This is my cayenne pepper, and it is amazing. So I've had a lot of experience with kids hurting themselves. So this is coming from it. I used to carry wound clot. It's like what they use on a battlefield, and you rip it open and pour it into a wound and it stops bleeding. And that's great. I've used cayenne pepper to better effect with the same thing. Another thing that's really good is yarrow. Does everybody know what yarrow looks like? Looks like a little fern. It's beautiful. It smells good. Its other name is soldier's wort.
Did you talk to me about that?
I did. I showed you what it was when we were on a trip together. It grows everywhere. They used to call it soldier's wort because before a battle, men would gather yarrow and put it in their pockets, and they'd keep it as close to them as a wart, right? They keep it close because even wet, if you masticate it or break it up a little bit and put it into a cut, it'll stop bleeding. If you dry it out and powder it, you can pour it into a wound like cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper is amazing, and it's the cheapest, easiest option to stop. I mean, if you've got a spurter, it's not going to stop a spurter, right? But a heavy bleed that's not quitting, you can pour cayenne pepper in. Let me give you a disclaimer. First time I used it, we had a therapist in the field. He got his first knife and cut himself really deep. And he's bleeding, and we can't get it to stop with pressure. And I'm like, hey, I've got some cayenne pepper. Do you want me to try it? And he's like, sure, do it. And I go to pour it on there, and a gust of wind blew it into my eyes, and it dropped me flat. I can't tell you how many times I've got things out of people's eyes, and I'm like, you gotta open it. I'm gonna have to, like this is really good for kind of squirting into an eye to get not into the eye, a little ways away, but squirt the water into the eye. And the guy that was with me, he took a water bottle, just a regular little disposable water bottle, poked a hole in the lid, and squeezed it. Squeezed, that's the right word. Squoze would have been acceptable too, but I found out that's not a real word. Squoze isn't a real word. But you all would have understood what I said, because many of you are from Utah. That might sound weird to you. Squeezed is the correct form. I said it right this time. He squeezed it into my eye and flushed it. So be careful, because that can actually drop you. It's what you use in pepper spray.
Have you had any experience with powdered alum?
No. No. Same thing. Nature's amazing.
Old tree guy told me that a long time ago.
Help stop bleeding? Yeah. There's a lot. And to be honest, I'm being cautious here, but pretty much if you've got a cut and you don't have anything to put on it, you can kind of pull the bark off of anything in the underneath layer and put it on that cut, and it's probably going to help you better than not having anything. But, okay, I got to move along. So cayenne pepper's awesome. I always have a first aid mask with me. Quickly, an improvised first aid mask. You can take a glove, a disposable glove, cut off the tips of the longest 2 fingers. A lot of people won't do mouth to mouth on somebody because that's gross, right? But with a glove, you can kind of do an improvised one-way valve. That's what this is. When you open it up, there's a valve. You can breathe in, but what's in them can't come out, right? You can do it with a glove. Some of you took my class. Did I show you the glove thing in our last preparedness fair? You cut off the tips and you push those down into somebody's mouth and then pull the wrist part over their mouth, and you can breathe into it. And if they vomit or spit or anything like that, it pushes up and it won't come out. So that's an improvised technique.
Does that make a one-way breather?
What's that?
Do you mix a one-way?
One-way breather valve, essentially. It's not perfect, but it's improvised. It's better than nothing, right? So have these. I don't have time to tell you about tincture of benzoin. Holy cow, I'm really fast.
I think they would die before I got to the bottom of the scissors. Already.
Yeah, that's true. Did you take a roll?
I did.
Oh my heavens, thank you so much.
No,
Okay.
I don't know if these guys got it.
Yes, I did.
Did you?
Yes.
I know.
Some of the pills that I take with me, and I take them out of their original containers, which is a big no-no and all of that. I used to write in the tops of them like how to take it. I just use very few, but these come with me everywhere because I can treat about whatever I need. Lots of ibuprofen. I've got Imodium in here for, you know, things that don't go well. I've got Benadryl to take. I've got Pepto-Bismol pills, and I've got antacids. The black pills that you can see in there is charcoal, and I teach a whole 2-hour class on the medicinal use of charcoal, and it's a miracle drug, charcoal. Now they call it fancy things in the hospital, activated charcoal, all this stuff, and activated charcoal, all that means is you've burned away the impurities and it leaves the pore, it's porous. It'll absorb, not absorb, it ADS, adsorb, which just means it grabs onto, holds on to poisons and will pass them through your system and not allow your body to take it in. It's a miracle drug.
Is it a pill form?
This is pill form, yep. Now you need to be careful because people take charcoal for a whole bunch of reasons, and because it can cause constipation, certain areas on Amazon, they'll add a laxative to it. But in reality, if you don't have Imodium in the outdoors, I've been where I've had kids, I myself have had diarrhea horribly. You can take charcoal. I would crush up in a mug, a little mug, probably 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch in the bottom, crush it up as fine as you can. And I had Diet Coke at the time and I just drank it down. It has no taste, texture is a little gritty, but it'll work like Imodium and it'll stop diarrhea in the wilderness. It'll stop poisons. In fact, they list the things it doesn't help with instead of the things that it will help with. If you, I mean, the first guy that pioneered this in the 1700s took arsenic, a poison, in front of, you know, they all stand around and when they were doing autopsies in one of those rooms, he took arsenic and everybody's like, holy cow, and he took an added measure of charcoal and nothing happened to him. And that, but it won't help with alcohol. So if there's alcohol overdosing, it doesn't help with that. But other than that, about any poison it'll help with.
Isn't it food poisoning? Yeah, if you get
Yep.
botulism or something.
Yep. Me and a group of us that teach primitive skills went to the homeless shelter over here and we taught some of these techniques to people because they get food poisoning all the time from the things that they eat. And we taught them about charcoal. And charcoal is just the light black stuff in the bottom of your fire pit that's been really well burned. Because at the bottom of those fires, there's almost no oxygen. The hospitals talk about activated charcoal because they put them in a container and get rid of all the oxygen and burn off all the impurities. You can do that too. Every fire creates activated charcoal. So the light stuff that has no brown in it, that's really light, you can crush it up. It's very porous. It's so porous, 1 tablespoon has the same surface area as a football field. It's so porous, and that's what grabs onto the poisons and will allow it to pass through you. So charcoal in the wilderness is your friend, right? So I keep that with me. I've got, nope, you don't want to use those. There's lots of chemicals added to those, especially now so that you can throw 1 match on them and they'll light. You don't want to use briquettes, yeah. Okay, if I have to leave you with 2 things because my time's gone, holy cow, I'm sorry. I didn't even get into my internal contents, but let me do a plug for 2 other kind of things that I love. This is a brand name and I will use it and I will say I don't get anything from it. This is called Leuko tape, Leuko. It is the best medical tape I've ever seen. You can put this on the bottom of your foot and walk around on grass for a whole week and it will not come off. And if you're in the wilderness, that is priceless. You know, you're treating blisters or anything. Leuko tape is what I keep in my med kit. I'll keep some of this cheap white stuff. If I have a wound that's up on a shoulder, it doesn't need to be in a high stress area and it's cheap. This is more expensive, but this is my precious out there. And because the name of the game in the wilderness is keeping your wounds clean, and you do that by making people look like mummies. You wrap them up really well. You irrigate to get rid of that dirt to keep them safe, and then you keep them clean by using Leuko tape. Honey. Has anybody ever heard me preach about honey? This is the big one. I have bees at my house, not because I love the way it's good, but because I use it as medicine. The first time I went to a primitive skills, I love medical stuff, and I went to a primitive skills thing. I was a student. I went to Big Cat Farnaman's class. Her name is Kat. and she was preaching about honey, and I had just finished my EMT, and I'm like rolling my eyes, like, and there's always this like herbal people versus Western medicine versus, and I just combine it all and call it practical, because some of the stuff works, others don't. What works for you and your body might be different than mine. She talked about somebody growing the tip of their finger back with honey, and I'm like, oh my, what am I doing? But she told a story about a guy named Peter Bigfoot who lost the tip of his finger and put it in a jar of honey and like taped it on there, and the finger grew back. It's not going to grow back bone, right? But if it's a flesh wound, and I'm like, that can't be real. I'm going to test this. It's the closest to double-blind testing I've ever. I'm like, could this be real, right? Are you guys for another class?
Yeah,
I am
listen while we're.
Okay, I'm about done. But I got to tell this Peter Bigfoot story. So,
So did you cut your finger off and try it?
I'm getting there, and I got pictures. Because that was my contention. I hear all this stuff. Why are there any pictures? If this is a magical thing, if slippery elm root does this cool thing, where, just show me. I just want to see. So I'm listening and not really believing, but I got it in my head that you could grow the tip of a finger back, right? I came home, my brother was going to the U of U, and apparently bowling is a class. I didn't know it was a class. He bowled so much with both hands, he had identical blisters. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to put honey on one and not on the other. And sure enough, the one I put honey on, you could still see it. There was no red, no swelling, it was gone. The other one, puffy, oozing, gross. And I was like, okay, that's weird. I put it on cuts, they healed real quick, but I didn't have a comparison. I put it on my dog who got hurt.
Do you cover it with something after?
You want to keep it moist with honey, yes. My brother-in-law, he was a carpenter, and he was holding a handheld router, and he was going along a beam like that, and it hit a knot, and it jumped, and it took the tip of his finger off. He went to the hospital. You could see the tip of the bone poking out, and he called me, and he's like, what's that witchcraft you're always talking about? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's talking about my honey thing, right? And so I said, honey, I've heard will heal it, you got to keep it moist. And I had him take pictures, and he went to the hospital, they treated it, cleaned it, and they said, you're going to have a deformed finger for the rest of your life, that's just what you're going to have to deal with. I told him, you put the honey on, keep it moist. I've been told it'll go gray, it'll look gross, it'll look like you want to wipe it off. And I said, that's the new flesh forming, don't. He took pictures of it, I can show you guys after. Within 4 days, it had almost completely, like the flesh was back, but it looked gnarly. Within a month, completely healed, and there's just a tiny little scar on the tip of his finger. Grew his finger back, so it was real. Now, if you cut off your arm, it's not going to grow your arm back, right? But the honey, if you study it, has amazing medical capabilities, and there is history, and I teach a class just on honey. So put this in your med kit. If people come to my medical tent, they leave with a bandage and honey, 90% of the time, right? So, and it doesn't matter if you're even allergic to it. You're not taking it internally. I've never had anybody put it on a cut that's allergic to honey and react.
But it needs to be pure honey and not.
Thank you.
With raw?
Yes, it's raw honey. You can get raw honey at Walmart. You just have to read. If it's been filtered, if it's been pasteurized, that means it's been heated up and it kills the good stuff in it that heals. So raw honey will heal you.
A lot of gas
Amen.
stations sell raw honey, like as a travel thing, and so
Yep.
it's kind of interesting. So if they have
Green sells
Manuka honey too.
Okay. I'll finish. You guys are my next batch of medical officers. So go out there and stop people from getting hurt. But improve your knowledge as much as you can, because
If anybody didn't sign the list, your email, he's gonna email you what's in his kit.
sign this up and I'll send you the rest of the stuff that's in my med kits. So anyway, thank you guys. I'm sorry I was late.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.